This is the Nostalgic Future Podcast, where the past is the only way forward.
We're two guys in our 40s watching the world pass us by, and we know the only way we'll ever be relevant again is to somehow convince everyone to be as passionate as we are about our pop culture obsessions.
We are your hosts, Joe Cook and Chris Marchand, and today is our first Listener Mailbag special.
Welcome, everybody. Today's episode is a little bit different. It's not a full episode. We don't have a big subject or a particular movie or an artist that we're talking about, something nostalgic that Joe and I are remembering. Instead, it's our listener mailbag episode. You've written into us, you've connected with us on social media, and what's great is we have a full mailbag today. We're pulling out letter after letter after letter. You know what? We're like Ringo Starr in A Hard Day's Night. That's how great we're doing here today. We don't even have enough time to answer all these letters, but you know what? We've got a handful of them that we're going to read for you here today.
We have a team of people with, just hauling duffel bag after duffel bag in, and and we're a little behind. I mean, we're actually going to be talking about stuff going back to some of our earliest episodes, because we're really that bad at our answering our fan mail.
Yeah, that's right.
Speaking of Ringo, do you remember that The Simpsons, when Marge had written him a fan letter in 1964, and then he like 30 years later he got around to he got to her letter.
Dear Sally, in response to your letter of December the 12th, 1966, my favourite colour is blue, and my real first name is Richard. Thanks for the snapshot. You're a real cute bird. Love, Ringo. P.S. Forgive the lateness of my reply.
Mr. Starr, tea and crumpets.
Just set it over there.
Sir, if you'll forgive an old Brit his impertinence, your devotion to your fans is nothing short of remarkable.
Well, Weatherby, they took the time to write me, and I don't care if it takes me another 20 years. I'm going to answer every one of them. Hello, what's this? From Springfield, USA. Yeah.
Dear Marge, he's really, and it's real Ringo, right? It's a real Ringo. It's really sweet.
I remember his room was just filled with mail.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's us. We are like Ringo, and we're finally getting to you. So anyway, let's begin.
Okay, so we had this comment come in on YouTube from a guy named Mike Brannon, and this was just in the past couple weeks, but this is about one of our first episodes. This is one of our earliest episodes where we did a rabbit hole segment on Rax Roast Beef and their pitchman, Mr. Delicious.
Well, hello. Remember me? I'm Mr. Delicious. Did you know the Rax Value menu features a full array of adult-sized delectables for only 99 cents each? That's right. And Mr. Delicious can really appreciate a bargain like that. After all, he's still trying to recover from that bout with midlife crisis in '89. Fortunately, he was able to sell the Porsche back to the dealer. But much to his chagrin, Mr. Delicious discovered that custom-designed hair weaves are non-refundable. Same for the rotating disco glitter ball he installed in the basement. And that vacation he took to Bora Bora with those two young friends, well, that left Mr. Delicious feeling empty and unfulfilled. Unlike the robust sandwiches, baked potatoes, and refreshing drinks on the Rax Value menu for only 99 cents each. Tickety-dee.
Value menu available at participating restaurants. Rax, you can eat here.
And so we were talking on the show about how we wanted to help Rax bring Mr. Delicious back. We loved the character. We felt that Mr. Delicious was ahead of his time. And Mike writes in, and here's what he wrote. He said, Mr. Delicious was supposed to be a parody of a spokes character. He's not fun, he's depressing. He's not jovial, he's deadpan. And I think they were trying to make their restaurant appeal more to middle-aged patrons by speaking of their problems. In my opinion, there were two problems here. One, the commercial is just parody. It doesn't really sell the food or make you want to go out and buy a Rax roast beef. I kind of disagree on that, but we'll come back to that. Two, the rule of comedy is not to get too close to the truth. Mr. Delicious obviously has a very depressing, unfulfilling life. Most people are also living that. This is not going to endear them to your product. What do you think, Chris?
I think that's actually true. You can talk about the first point. The second point is true, which is, let's assume most middle-aged people are struggling somehow, right? Kind of trying to make their way through life. It is such an absurd message to say, hey, everybody, do you know how pathetic your life is? Do you know how you are barely just hanging on? You know what? You know what a pathetic person would do? They would drown their sorrows in a nice cheddar roast beef sandwich. I mean, that's kind of what the ad campaign is doing, which is not a good move. It's hilarious. I think this is why I love Mr. Delicious so much, because it's so bizarre, but it's not a good ad campaign.
I think, one could make the argument that Mr. Delicious' life sucks so much that he makes me feel better about my own life. And, I'm going to go hang out at Rax, and I'm going to give this poor schmuck my money because I just feel so sorry for him. The other thing, too, is that when he said that it doesn't make you want to go out and buy a Rax. I have never wanted to buy a Rax roast beef sandwich more than I do right now. Again, I've said I haven't eaten beef in the last decade. I am there. And again, we mentioned this, I think, in the last episode or in the last couple episodes. Rax, if you're listening, we want to work with you. Come on, sponsor this show, and I will get out to Illinois, and I will Chris and I will go up there together. We will tape our show live at Rax, and I will eat my first roast beef sandwich in a decade on this podcast live. So
that would be a good episode. Filming, recording at Rax, and I would be lovely.
So anyway, but no, thank you, Mike. I mean, he does make some good points, and certainly, like, if you he's not alone. If you go into some of the comments sections on different YouTube videos and what about Mr. Delicious, people seem to be somewhat torn on Mr. Delicious. Personally, I love the guy, and I think maybe everything that Mike is saying is exactly why Mr. Delicious failed, 30 plus years ago. I think that the shift in kind of just how we engage with this kind of stuff, I think things and times have changed enough that people could embrace a character like Mr. Delicious. I think that I think he really, I truly do mean that when I'm not really joking. I do think he was, or the character was, ahead of its time.
I think in order to bring him back, which I fully support, it would require people to really be in on the joke. And so there'd have to be almost like a double joke or a double layer there, which is, we don't want you to think that you're pathetic like this, but check out this guy. And isn't he funny as a parody of like the pathetic middle-aged man?
And that's why he would be perfect on this podcast, because we get you, Mr. Delicious. Who better than two pathetic middle-aged men doing a podcast from their houses to get you, Mr. Delicious? We're not on some big fancy radio station. We don't have millions of listeners. We are Mr. D's, like, we're his target right there. And I think we're his demographic. We get him, and that's why he should be exclusive on this show. We should be like the exclusive show where Mr. Delicious comes on to pitch Rax roast beef sandwiches. I think they have 6 restaurants. We have 6 listeners. It is a match made in heaven.
The door's open. Joe, do you have another letter from a listener?
I do. This is from our buddy Gary Hawk. Gary is just up the road from me, actually, in Melbourne, Florida, like an hour from here. And we didn't know each other aside. He stumbled across our podcast, I think, when we did our last Beatles movie night, or maybe it was when we did the Better Call Saul stuff. But he reached out to us. I think we gave him a shout out a few months back. But Gary reached out. This is when we did our New Year's resolutions, our pop culture resolution episodes. And he said, hey, listening to the latest podcast, loving it. By the way, currently reading God Only Knows, The California Myth by David Leaf. So we were talking, one of your resolutions was music biographies that you had planned to read this year. He's telling us his latest book on the Beach Boys. So that sounds great. And also he said, Joe, I have that Joey D and the Starlighters album. Now, if anybody remembers this, I mentioned in that episode that one of my resolutions was to start collecting more vinyl. And I mentioned a few records that I had just picked up that morning when we taped. And one of them was this record by Joey D and the Starlighters. Their big hit record or song was The Peppermint Twist. And the album was Joey D and the Starlighters live at the Peppermint Lounge. And Gary has a copy of that record himself. So, hey, pretty cool stuff. Thank you for checking in, Gary.
Well, they got a new dance and it goes like this. Yeah, the name of the dance is the Peppermint Twist. Well, you like it like this, the Peppermint Twist. Round and round.
Now, Chris, you got a couple messages too on more recent episodes, on our Weird Al Yankovic episodes that we just did, right?
Yeah, so these are two guys that I know. They decided to chime in. One is an incredibly nice note complimenting us on the podcast. The other is a really funny Weird Al story. So I'll start with Rich Gerberding, and he's a guy that I've known over the years. He does a lot with films in the area, especially Christian films coming to theaters. And here's what he says. He says, okay, over the past maybe 5 years, I've listened to a lot of podcasts, mostly business, entrepreneurship, leadership, some sports, movies, entertainment. Today, a friend, that's me, posted a podcast where he and a friend discuss a concert he went to a few weeks ago. I was at the same concert, and honestly, this might be the most fun podcast I've ever listened to. If you like or liked Weird Al now or at some point in your life, you'll probably feel like you were sitting there with them this whole time. And then he thanks me, and then he invites me, hey, next time you want to go to a Weird Al concert, let's ride together. Who knows if that'll ever happen, but Rich, appreciate your note, and glad to know that you were there.
So you didn't know Rich was there that night then?
Had no idea. And Rich is an acquaintance, and he's somebody that I've interacted with over the years. There's one time that we brought like a film to a church, and he helped to kind of do that. And so it was good to make the connection, and really nice of him to say all that.
Thank you, Rich, because that was really, really a kind message.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. Thanks for listening too. Sorry that we're not going to have more Weird Al content. We're going to move on. We're going to talk about other things. Maybe somebody out there will be inspired to start their own Weird Al podcast.
Well, we'll be back when they release Weird 2, the sequel to.
There you go. That's right. Yeah. And I'll be back the next time I meet Al on the other side of a plastic curtain. I'll be back to talk about that. My other letter comes from, now this is one of my old friends. His name is Tom Masters. Him and I played in a band together when my wife and I kind of did an initial stages of a band. It didn't last long, and how these things work sometimes, but Tom played worship music with me. We went to church together for a while. He is a big Weird Al fan, and here's what he said. Number one, this is a little bit on a somber note, but he did happen to see Weird Al on the day he came to Peoria in 2004, the day his parents died. So he saw him live in concert. Then that's an amazing story of itself, the fact that he was there for that. So that's really memorable. The story that I'm going to share, though, is actually pretty funny. He says this: when I saw Weird Al in probably 2001, we went with some friends who had seen him a few times before, and they made the claim that if you could find Al's bus after the show, he does a meet and greet. And he says we ended up standing there for a long time, and they had to wait, as you do, like 40 or so people. He gets up to Al and he says this is the line for Weird Al? I thought this was the line for Milli Vanilli. And then it says this. He says, Al looked me dead in the eye with the most irritated look on his face. So my friend's thinking, oh boy, I've really put my foot in it. So I get to the front of the line, and I'm just a little starstruck and telling him a story about something funny that happened regarding the theme song to the Weird Al show. My friend was trying to inspire him how to write a song called I Did It All for the Wookiee as a Limp Bizkit parody, which of course Al told him he doesn't really take suggestions for parodies. So we moved on our way in the line. I got about 25 feet away, which, by the way, he had handed Al something to sign. He had handed it to him, his shirt. He got about 25 feet away, walked back to the car. He looked down at the autograph, and it says this: "Thanks, Milli Vanilli." And so
that's amazing.
And almost like a movie setup, I turned around and he was signing someone else's shirt, and my friend went, "Hey." Al smiled back and says, "Gotcha," and then grinned back at him. He says that was just about the coolest celebrity encounter I could ever imagine having.
Girl, you know it's true. I love you. Yes, you know it's true. I love you.
So, Tom, thanks for sharing your story. It's good to hear that story.
That is a great story. I have nothing that cool. And by the way, he is really, really lucky because I have tried hanging out at Al's bus and he never came out. Yeah. So I never met him. I didn't even meet him with plastic between us. So, but that's a great story. I have a similar story that's not nearly as good, but I don't know when else I'll ever share this. So what the heck? It was so when I worked in radio in Jersey, I attended the New Jersey Broadcasters Association luncheon at the Atlantic City Hilton. And so it was just a broadcasters convention of all New Jersey broadcasters, and our keynote speaker was Steve Forbes. So,
oh, okay,
yeah. You remember boring, stuffy old white guy that ran for president?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And it was a boring speech. I mean, like this is all broadcasters, and it was a broadcast luncheon, and he talked about the flat tax for 45 minutes. I mean, it was it was really, really dull. And on all of our, as we sat down at our table, every seat there was a copy of Forbes, the magazine Forbes, sitting there. So Mr. Forbes had decided to give everybody the latest issue of Forbes, and on the cover that month was Justin Bieber. And so this is years ago. I mean, this is this had to be over a decade ago. Justin Bieber was the new hot thing. So afterwards, Steve Forbes is hanging around, chatting with people. So I go up and what the heck? I'm going to go get my copy of Forbes signed. So I go over and the president of the New Jersey Broadcasters Association is standing there next to Steve Forbes. And I've never met that guy. I don't know his name, but he was there. And I go up to Steve Forbes and I say, "Hey, would you mind signing this?" And he's signing. As he's signing it, I turned to the president of the Broadcast Association. I said, "Man, this is great." I said, "I'm going to go home and put this on eBay and put signed Justin Bieber Forbes." And the president of the Broadcast Association, he starts cracking up. Steve Forbes gave me the dirtiest look you can possibly imagine. He totally took it way too seriously. I still have that magazine somewhere. Anyway,
he was mad that you were going to take it off and sell it. Probably he was mad about that, right?
If he had signed it Justin Bieber, that would have been a great story. So, but he didn't. He did sign it Steve Forbes, and I got it, and all I got was a dirty look.
That's funny.
But anyway, that's my Steve Forbes story.
I love how that's the apex of your celebrity encounters.
Oh yeah, that is hands down my most memorable celebrity encounter.
You're you're sitting around, everyone's telling their stories, and you're like, should I share the Steve Forbes one?
Honestly, I don't know if I've ever shared that story till today. I've never had another opportunity to. So what was your friend's name again?
Tom Masters.
So thank you, Tom, for giving me an excuse to tell my Steve Forbes story, which is not nearly as good as your Weird Al story.
Yeah. I remember SNL doing good parodies of him, just kind of make, everyone scratching their heads. I hope this guy doesn't become president.
I do remember who did Steve Forbes on SNL, because I do seem to remember that.
I don't remember.
No,
I don't know.
Anyway, we do have one more letter in the mailbag. And this one comes from our friend Nate Eichelman, and he sent this one on. This is also on the Weird Al episodes. Many things on the new podcast. First of all, awesome. I found myself agreeing on most everything. Well, we like it when people agree with us, so thank you, Nate. Quick things. Anytime I hear the words disembodied head on the song Why Does This Always Happen, I crack up. He played that song at the show you went to, right? I think you mentioned that one.
That's right. Yeah.
You know, I got to tell you, that's a song of his I was not familiar with and is freaking hilarious. And I have to say that when he did sing the line about the disembodied head, I lost it. So it is a pretty funny line.
I was driving down the highway when all the traffic slowed to a crawl. There was a 12-car pileup, everybody dead. And I saw brains and guts and vital organs splattered everywhere, as well as my friend Robert's disembodied head.
Little dark, Nate, but funny. So that always makes him crack up. It's one of my favorites. Nate went on to say, I know a lot of pop music only because of Weird Al's polkas. So that's great because that's so true. There were so many songs back in the day when I would hear like, you know, alternative polka or polka your eyes out or those things those medleys that he did. I was not a kid who really followed a lot of alternative or that kind of music or more like harder rock or whatever. The stuff that he would do, there were definitely songs that I knew, but there were always songs in his polkas that I didn't know. So I'm with Nate on that one.
I love all of you, hurt by the cold, so hard and lonely too, when you don't know yourself. I don't owe you anything, I don't owe you anything, I don't owe you anything, I don't owe you anything.
Now, the next one, he mentions something that we had spoken about in the episode. I had mentioned that at one point I had went to a Barry Manilow concert, and at that Barry Manilow concert I learned that Barry Manilow fans are called Fanilows. This is kind of, you know, like these little cute little nicknames that artists give their fans, like Taylor Swift fans or Swifties, or you probably know some too. And
I was trying to think of Justin Bieber. What are they called? Bieber heads?
No, they're believers.
Believers. That's what
they are believers. So exactly. And we had said, well, what are Weird Al fans called? He has an answer for us. He says, I think Al fans are actually called weirdos, which is actually perfect if you think about it. So I guess we are just a couple of weirdos, Chris. And he also said, yes, because we talked about Al's band a lot. One of the most impressive things about Weird Al when I saw him was his band. And yeah, absolutely. His band's incredible.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? I'm going to surprise you here. Call back. Mark McKinney played Steve Forbes on SNL.
Oh, yes. Okay. I can picture it now.
From Kids in the Hall, but he was also on SNL for a season.
I remember that. Yeah. Oh, that's tremendous.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I'm Steve Forbes, and I've purchased airtime to talk to you this evening. As you may know, earlier this week, I announced the end of my campaign for the presidency, which I can accept. But I refuse to accept the end of my dream to lead America under a flat tax plan. So I did what anyone would have done. I took $114 million of my own dollars, and I bought myself my very own America. And I'm the president. How'd I do it? It was easy. I just bought up a big chunk of cash poor Russia, which nobody was really using anyway. But Russia doesn't look like America, you're saying. You're right. So I used laser beams shot from my own space satellites to blast away all these little extra bits around the edges and sink them into the sea. You might have heard about that on the news. Anyway, voila, Forbes America. Isn't it just bully?
Yeah, my buddy Steve Forbes and I have a picture of us. I should post it, but I don't know. I'll have to find it.
That should be the episode. That should be the episode picture is you and Steve Forbes.
Yeah, probably not. But
on our TV. Yeah. Oh, well,
goodness.
thanks everyone for chiming in, and we love to hear from you. And you know what? Keep it coming as we love the engagement as every episode comes out. So it's good to hear from everyone, and it's especially good we're hoping to hear from Rax.
Another letter from our listener day.
So thanks for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed the listener mailbag. And next time, we're really excited to be able to share. We are doing another Beatles movie night. Now, Joe, what is the title of this one? This one actually kind of relates to Hard Day's Night, which was our first Beatles movie night, but it's also a little different. It's both an official and not quite an official Beatles film, isn't it? Right?
Well,
Tell us what it is and where it came from.
I mean, it's definitely, I would put it in the official category, but it was certainly handled differently than they handled the Beatles today. You know, like, and one of the things I would say about that is, like, when you see anything that is done relating to the Beatles now in 2023, or even in the last decade, it seems like Paul and Ringo are always very much involved. It seems like Yoko is usually, there's been some involvement from the Lennon estate to some point. George Harrison's widow, Olivia, you know, there's always some kind of oversight, and there's usually a more direct involvement. A lot of those, like, kind of Beatles documentaries and things like that, you know, recent, you know, in like maybe past decades, there's some really great stuff out there, but they didn't have necessarily that direct involvement with the Beatles, so they don't necessarily feel quite as official. But this is a pretty official film. It's called the Beatles: The First U.S. Visit, and actually, to be honest, it actually had another name when it was originally released. And the reason we're choosing this is for a number of reasons, and we'll get into that in the next episode. But it was originally released in 1964. And this is really the first feature-length documentary made about the Beatles. And when it was released, it was called What's Happening? The Beatles in the USA. And it was made for Granada TV in the UK. And it was re-edited in 1991 and released on VHS and Laserdisc. It's also subsequently been released on DVD as The Beatles: The First U.S. Visit. And it chronicles those first, you know, couple weeks of the Beatles in America, February 1964, when they came to the States and played the Ed Sullivan Show. They did their first couple concerts over here. And the filmmakers joined the Beatles at the airport and followed them around on this trip and made this just really cool behind-the-scenes documentary. Now, what I want to say, though, we're going to watch this documentary. We want you to watch it, too. We always want to encourage you to watch along these things. This is we haven't done a Beatles movie night in probably 7 or 8 months. We want to do these a little more often. So we're going to do our second Beatles movie night. And when we do that, we want you to get your popcorn, watch the movie. And so then we all gather together on the podcast and we have a discussion. And we want you in on that discussion. But this is a little bit harder film to find because, as I mentioned, it was released in 1991 on VHS and Laserdisc. It was reissued on DVD in 2004 for the 40th anniversary of the original film. And after that, it's really never been available anywhere. But that doesn't mean you can't find it. We're going to help you with that. We are going to post the links. It is available in the Internet Archive over on archive.org. And we're going to post a link for that on all of our social media accounts. So, you know, as you're listening to this, just go over to, find us on Twitter, Facebook, wherever, and you'll find the links so that you can watch this. Also, you could do what I did. I actually went and I ordered a copy of it on DVD. It's not hard to find. You can go on eBay. I bought it on Amazon. I got it on Amazon. It was a used copy. It was $9.99. I really recommend the DVD if you can, just because the DVD is great. It has a lot of great extra content in it. And we'll talk about some of that on that episode. But I mean, there's a making of documentary. There is, one of the directors, he actually did a feature length commentary to the film and there's just so much great background information on the DVD. And in fact, in some ways, I think I almost enjoyed the making of documentary more than the actual film itself, because there's so much great footage and unreleased footage that didn't make it into the final film that is that basically comprises that bonus documentary. It's primarily footage, extra footage, really worth checking out. But if you can't check it out, if you can't buy it, don't worry about it. We're going to be talking about the main film, and you will be able to stream that, and we'll provide the links. But yeah, it's the Beatles, the first U.S. visit. We're going to be watching the 1991 version because, unfortunately, the original 1964 version isn't available anywhere. There's just no way to get a copy of it in its original form. But we're going to watch that, and we're going to talk about it, and we want to invite you to join us for that next time on Nostalgic Future Podcast.
That's great. Thanks, everyone, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Nostalgic Future Podcast. We'd love to hear from you. Drop us a line at nostalgicfuturepodcast@gmail.com. We may just read your letter on an upcoming show. Follow us on social media, Nostalgic Future Podcast on Facebook and @PastFuturePod on Twitter. Please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave a review to help support what we do. Until next time, remember, the past is the only way forward.
Hello, what's this? It's for you, Marge, from merry old England.
From the desk of Ringo Starr.
Dear Marge, thanks for the fab painting of yours truly. I hung it on me wall. You're quite an artist. In answer to your question, yes, we do have hamburgers and fries in England, but we call French fries chips. Love, Ringo. P.S. Forgive the lateness of my reply.
No.